Welcome everyone, and thank you for being in this session. My name is Shri, work as a lead developer for Nielsen. I've been working with them for 4 years now. So in this session, we're going to talk about how we were able to simplify the experience for both users and developers by using the Ext JS framework from Sencha. So how many of you here have heard about Nielsen, or we're also known as AC Nielsen, or the ratings company? Cool, so there are a couple of people than I thought. So Nielsen is a global leading information and measuring company, which enables companies to understand consumers and the consumer behavior. So Nielsen, primarily we have, our business is divided into two different platforms. One is the watch platform, where we measure and monitor what people are watching on the TV, online, radio, books, computers. So we take this data, process this data, and sell it to our clients, and who can do some analysis on how to buy and how to do advertising. So our clients include like CBS, Walt Disney, ESPN, guys like that. And the other part of the business is the buy platform. Here we collect and monitor data about what people are buying from the stores, and we enable the consumer package the consumer package companies and the retailers. We collect the data across the retailers, and so that they can generate reports and get the analysis of how their products are doing in the market. And we segregate the data based on the products and the brands, and across the multiple markets. And the clients on the consumer side include Walmart, Safeway, Nestle, Procter & Gamble, Unilever. So Nielsen Answers on Demand is a tool primarily related to the buy platform, about how it's to understand how people are buying the data. And it's a single web interface to do on the fly, to get the on the fly data, doing the dynamic reporting and getting analytics about the data. So here are a couple of the capabilities of AOD, and the tool will enable to do reporting anytime. And we wanted a single web interface, which is connected to the different backend data sources. So the data that we get is from different channels. So we get data, we call them as scan, panel, and loyalty. Scan is the point of sales data that we get from the retailers, and loyalty is your reward cards or the loyalty cards that you swipe. So we get to know the user information and basket metrics, like what kind of like when the user goes to a grocery store, what kind of products that they're buying in a single trip. And the other is the panel. We have Nielsen meters giving it to people. We call them panelists. So once they're done with the shopping, they come back home and they scan the groceries that they have purchased, and we collect. We process the data, so we get personal demographics like ethnicity, and we get to know we can cater some advertising for people in that particular category. So this platform is a single front-end web application, and as I said, it's connected to different data sources in the backend. So as of today, we have about more than 200 clients, and we have about more than 12,000 users using the system as on today, and we are still growing. And our presence is in about 100 countries across North America, South America, Asia, Middle East, Europe, and Russia. So, and from Nielsen as a whole, it houses about 60 petabytes of data. And for the consumer data, it's out of the 60 petabytes, I think about 2 petabytes is the consumer data that this platform uses to process the requests from the users. And at our operational data store, at every week we get about we process about 1.5 billion transactions every week. So that's a lot of data. And we give our clients about 10 years worth of data. So we store a history of 10 years data, which relates to about 1 trillion transactions. So before I go into specifics about how we built or what we built using Ext JS, I want to take a couple of minutes to see where we were before as a legacy platform. So this is a screen print of how the legacy front end looked like, where this is the client facing, where users come in, and this is where they run send in the requests or run the reports. And this screen, what you're seeing right now, it's built on Adobe Flex. And this is the framework where you start to either build your reports or start doing your analysis. So this tool is called Data Selector, and we use this tool. The clients use this tool to make their selections across dimensions like markets, products, periods, and facts. So I'm going to go into the details of that in a little bit. So this is by the way, the data selector, it's built on prototype. So it's a JavaScript-based framework. And this is a design tool. So once the user is done with the selection, so they want the data in a grid, or so this is the design tool. They can pull these dimensions, place it in the grid, so that once they run the report, the data will be represented in the table in the grid. So in this design tool, the only visualization that we provided was a grid. So that was the only option available. But we also have some custom reports where it's a pre-configured. So there was no ability for the users to configure like a different chart or something. So we had that pre-configured and not exposed to the users. And this is the rendering engine once they design the report and make the selections, and this is the end report would look like. Again, this rendering engine was built out of Adobe Flex. So here are the challenges that we had with the legacy platform. As you could tell, there were a couple of tools that were built on Adobe Flex. There were a framework that was built on JavaScript-based framework, which is jQuery. So we were all over. And to add any feature, it used to take a lot of time. And obviously, you need developers who have knowledge across various technologies to make the changes. And also, we had issues with supporting all the browsers. So whenever Adobe comes up with like a new version of the Flash player, or whenever there is a new version of browser, like we used to have issues, and fixing issues was just a nightmare. And if any of you here, guys here, are working with an application which is based on both JavaScript and Flex, stop it. Seriously. You need to switch. So with the browsers, especially Internet Explorer was a pain, especially the version 8. So I would like to take a moment of silence for those people who still use that browser. So the next thing is theming. I think most of you attended the session from this morning about the theming with Ext JS of how easy it was. So when we had this platform, the theming was developing style sheets across the frameworks or across the different front-end technologies was a pain. So again, the deployment and building and deployment, again, was a manual process, and we used to have dedicated people just to do the deployment, and building and deployment, and it used to take forever. So even as a framework, we provided so many features on the web, and our clients still used to run those reports, take the data, export into Excel, and they used to do all the analysis on Excel. So even though we had such a good framework. And with Flash, forget about access on mobile devices. So these are the challenges that we face, and next I'm gonna show the framework, what we built using the Ext JS, and how we were able to resolve most of those challenges. So this is the enhanced version of the framework built on Ext JS. So this is the reporting framework. So we have completely changed how it looks and how it feels. So so on the left side is the content where is your starting point where you run the reports, and the right side is a panel where you would see the end report. So I'm going to show that in a little bit. So this is the enhanced version of the tool where users would select the data. As you can see, the styling and the way it looks and everything is consistent across the tools here. And this is the design tool. We also call it as report builder. So in legacy, we used to support only grid. Here we have multiple visualization options like charts, like vertical chart, horizontal chart, pie chart, scatter plot. And this is the rendering engine, how the report looks like once the user is done with it. So all the 4 tools are completely built and on Ext JS, and all these 4 tools are individual web applications. So I'm going to show now how these are integrated and put together. And these modules are just not for this platform. So we have other projects internally where these individual modules can also be integrated with other systems within our platform. So we can package these individual applications and ship it to other business units within Nielsen where they're able to integrate very easily with it. So this is a 1-hour-long video clip. I'm going to come back and sit with you guys. I'm just kidding. So I think it's about quick 10 minutes video clip, and I'm going to show this is a recorded session of running a report and how these 4 tools are integrated together and how the system works. So once the clients log in, so this is the landing page, what they see. So they see a custom home page based on the client. So I'm going to close the home page here, and on the left side, as I told, is the starting point of where you run the reports. We have multiple tabs there. User can store their content, all the reports that they have run before, and also share it across the team. And on the right side is a generic tab panel, and this tab panel is used to render other tools, to build a report or to view the report. And let's get started and run a report. And this is the data selector. So I'm going to pause here for a little bit. So the data selector, as you can see, it is a nested tab panel, and this has a lot of components. And the middle pane will have 2 grids, and the left and the right pane is a tree panel, and the left pane also has a customized tree panel. So what we do is, with this tool, we've implemented lazy rendering. Since there are so many UI components, it becomes really heavy. So as you can see, there is a base framework already rendered, so the browser's memory is already used up. So on top of this, we are rendering another tool. So lazy rendering is we only render the components that what users are seeing. So if you switch to the other tabs, there is nothing rendered until you click on it. So once you click on it, then we render it. Then we render it so that it doesn't. The load time, the initial footprint is really low. So I'm going to switch to the second tab over here. So as you can see, there's a little delay there. So now it renders. Now I go back to the first tab and come back, which means it's already rendered, so no need to re-render it again. So as you can see, the data is here categorized into multiple dimensions: markets, products, periods, and facts. So before I make the selections, the report I'm going to run here is how the battery sales are doing across couple of markets in the last 1 year, to see like everyone needs batteries, right? Let's see how many batteries were sold in last 1 year. So I'm picking markets. So there are a couple of functions that we have, features that we have introduced. So I have made in the middle pane, I've chosen all the markets by clicking on the button all. So the reason we do that is, let's say I have only 8 markets here. So let's imagine we have like 200 markets or something. So we don't want to send all the data over the wire. Like, I don't want to send every name of the market. So what we do is we use this filter called all, which means the backend knows I need to pull in all the markets and resolve it. And also it's dynamic because let's say I add 10 more markets, and if user runs the same report like a month later, he doesn't have to come back and choose. Because of the function all, it pulls in all the markets that is already out there. So like all, we also have all except, which means I want all the markets and except these 3, which means we're going to tell backend, hey, pull in all of them and just don't include these 3 markets. So I'm going to go back, and for the sake of this report, I'm just going to select a couple of markets. So let's see how the batteries are doing across the convenience stores and the food stores. So then I go to the product, and here the data of the products is sliced into different views, like hierarchies and characteristics. So in hierarchies, it's sliced into like categories, subcategories, brands, and UPCs. And the characteristics are like the size of the battery, like AA, AAA, and since this is aggregated data, we have characteristics such as the size and the flavor, etc. So I'm going to go to characteristics since I want to know how the batteries were doing. So I'm going to go to the category, and I should see, what am I doing? Oh, okay. So before that, if you want to search, if you want to look for anything, so there are like millions of UPCs and millions of items here. So I paused there. So I want to search for something. Let's say I want to search for Coke. So we use an elastic search behind the scenes to index our data and put the search. So once you select something and show in context, it's going to trace back and tell you what item are you looking at and which characteristic it is in. So that's the dimension-wide search. It searches across millions of items. So now I'm going to go back and go to the category and pick batteries. So I'm also interested only in few brands that manufacture batteries. So I know that the top brands are like Duracell, Energizer, and there's also a lot of private labels, like Safeway has its own private label batteries. So I'm also going to pick like any brands from the private labels. So as you can see, we maintain the tree structure on the right-hand side pane. So it's everything in sync. Like if user wants to change it, we can go back and pick a different selection. So coming to facts, so I'm going to pick like how I want the numbers in dollars and also the sales in dollars year ago. So with periods, there are a couple of features for the periods dimension. So periods dimension is that we build within our own system, like we want to know the sales in last 1 year or last few weeks, and there are also a couple of features that we put into the periods. So here you're looking at the periods and you're looking at the week ending date. So I just clicked on the function called relative, which means it gives you, it changes how you're looking at the periods, like you're looking at like last 1 week or last 5 weeks. So if you want to pick like last 10 weeks of data, so instead of like selecting 10 items, you can also engage a feature called through, which is right next to relative, which means with through, you need to select a start date and an end date. And and the backend knows, okay, when we send the flag start and the end, which means it needs to pick all the periods between these two endpoints. So I'm picking the start date and the end date, and so I just enable through. So last week is my start date, and the end date is like 10 weeks before that. So when I add it, so I enable that function, and our BI layer is gonna know how to resolve these selections. So I'm gonna go back to run this report. I'm only interested in the sales of batteries in last 1 year, so I will pick latest 52 weeks. So one thing to remember here is when I say latest 52 weeks, 6 months down the lane, if user wants to run report again for the latest 52 weeks, he doesn't have to come back and pick this selection again, because he can save that report. It's going to pick latest 52 weeks from that particular date. So all these periods are dynamic, so the user doesn't have to make the same exact selections and again and again. So I'm done picking the selections. Now I will build the report, like how I want to represent this data. So this is the design tool, or the report builder, what we call this. So by default, what I got rid of right now is we always put the basic grid or the table by default. So if user doesn't want to do any fancy things, if all they want is a simple data in a grid, so they don't have to play around with this and just click on running report and it's going to bring the data. So there's a lot of customization going on in this tool. So that canvas that we see here, it's built using the Ext JS Ext template, and it's a simple HTML generated. So that each grid, each cell in the grid is a rectangle, and it's HTML, and it represents the 5% resolution of the whole available area, which means even if you're looking at like a bigger, like 60-inch HDMI screen or like a 4x3 19-inch monitor, the resolution looks exactly the same, depending, it doesn't matter what size monitor that you have. So in this canvas, you have now a variety of options to choose to represent your report, the visualizations I'm talking about. So as you can see, there is multiple charts, and also that there's also a text option. So when you drag the report visualizations into the canvas, so here we do real-time calculation of how much space is left for like you can add as many visualizations as possible. So there is a real-time algorithm that's happening right there that calculates the position of your mouse pointer and calculate like whether I can fit this visualization into the space that is available right here. So, and if there is no enough space available, it's going to readjust it to the space that it has got. So since we have so many visualizations and we have only so much space in the canvas, we have a feature called page container, which means it's you can put objects in like multiple pages. So it's the same canvas, So you can create multiple pages and create as many visualizations as you want. So I just pulled in a page container, and there's again a canvas in each page. So in the first page, I'm going to pull a simple table and make use of the complete area of the canvas. So I'm going to go to page 2 because I want more visualizations. So I'm going to pull a vertical chart and say use about like 60% of the canvas. So, and I'm going to use a pie chart and use rest of the canvas. So when the report renders, the first page is rendered with the table with the full screen, and you scroll to the second page for additional visualizations. So now what I need, now I'm done with the visualizations, and now I need to pull the data in and tell the system how I want to represent the data that I just selected.
The Canva is an Ext template, but what do you drop on it?
I'm sorry?
The Canva is an Ext template, but what do you drop on it? Is that just a visualization?
It's just a view. It's just a visualization. So
It's not a Ext JS component in any way.
it's a view instance of the Ext JS component. So as you can tell, so there's a grid, and I can use multiple instances of the grid. And today, with the Ext JS, I think most of you know, with the Ext JS 5, Sencha has come up with the view models. So we've built this using the Ext JS 4.x version. So we have custom built the view models because we are using the same view multiple times. So we have extended the models and the stores and built a custom framework around it so that we have kind of built a view model with the Ext JS 4.x framework already with this. So now I want to put in the selections that I made for the markets and all that. So as I'm dragging and dropping, so there is rules that are defined and that is represented in the JSON format. So on the fly, it's calculating whether based on the rules, the little green and red thing that it was going on. So it's gonna highlight the zones where it's a valid drop, and it's not going to allow you to drop if it's not valid. So these calculations are happening real time based on the rules that are defined. So I put markets in the page by area, which what it means is I've selected a couple of markets. So the report data, it's going to render for only one market at a time. So if you want to switch to another market, so you need to go to the page by area once the report is rendered and switch a different market, and it's going to re-render your report for the different market. So I have markets, and now I'm going to pull in the other dimensions, put the batteries in the row into the grid, and I want, just to make sure I have enough data in the grid, instead of just picking the brands that I selected, I've selected all the brands for batteries, whoever makes batteries, so I'm pulling in all the brands. Then I go to the periods that I selected, which is I want the data for the last 52 weeks, but I'll also pull in the other period items. And I want to know, and I will nest it with the data I want the numbers in sales, like dollar sales. So since there's going to be like hundreds and 200s of brands making batteries, I only want like a top 10 brands. So I create a condition where I pull the report only for top 10 brands. And I'm going to take that condition and put it into the condition zone so that it's going to pull the report only for the top 10 brands. So I'm now done with the grid. Now I go to the page 2 of the container because I have 2 other visualizations where I need to configure this. So I'm going to do a similar thing, like I'm going to take the number, like the facts, I put it in the y-axis of the vertical chart. And I'm going to take the products, which is batteries, and put it in the x-axis. And the periods, which is the data for last 52 weeks in the legend, in the series. And now we do the same thing again for the pie chart. So I'm going to put the facts in the categories, and for the pie slices, I'll put the batteries nested. So this, I'm going to pause here for a second. This thing right here is the validation rules that we have built in. So if you're entering a form and if you don't enter a required field, so it's going to show you the validation, and like there's going to be a red border around it. So we didn't want to place those red borders everywhere within the visualization. So we wanted one place where user can see what kind of validations, what's stopping user to run a report. So this one tells that you're missing some dimensions in the pie chart. So if there are multiple pages, you don't have to scroll through each page to see what's wrong in what page. So you have one place to look at it. So now I know what's wrong with it, with the report. So now I'll go back and pick the dimensions that are missing and put it in the pie chart. So the slices for the pie, it's going to be the batteries, and for all the brands, that is nested with the periods. So again, there's going to be a lot of brands, and it's going to look a lot of data. So I'm only going to pick top 5 brands for these 2 visualizations. So I can either create a new condition or copy an existing condition and change the value to only top 5 brands and put those conditions into these 2 visualizations. So, and it's also doing the validations on the fly. As you can see on the top right corner, the run report button is now enabled, which means all the validations look good and it has passed all the rules. And now we are good to run the report. So once you run the report and it's completely asynchronous, I'm going to talk about that asynchronous feature in a little bit. So this is the rendered report, and as you can tell, there's so many columns here in the grid, and we use buffered rendering. So we don't render all the columns at once, and we only render so many number of columns based on the configuration. And go to the page 2, and these are the additional visualizations that we pulled in. And if you want to, you can expand and collapse each of the visualization to get a better view. And you can also export this data into other tools such as PDF and Excel and all the other tools where you can do additional analysis. So let's talk about the features that we were able to achieve with this framework. So as I mentioned, it's a multiple modules, and we can integrate these individual modules across the platform. And we use a technology called Comet D, and it's a reverse AJAX, and it's kind of WebSockets right now. So this is for the real-time feedback. So whenever we are running the reports, whenever we want to push a message into user's screen, we don't want users to wait to refresh the screen. So we want to push in the real time. So what Comet D does is it maintains a connection between the client and also the server, so that we can push the updates through this established connection. And we also have introduced something called session recovery. So when we were building this, we were doing an internal demo where one of our client services person spent like half hour to run a report, building a report. And we were on the call, and he accidentally closed the browser, which means he lost all the work that he did for a half hour. And he was not on mute, and he said, "I'm stupid." Then it was like, "Yes, you are." So it was like, then he's like, Can you guys do anything for this? It's like, yeah, train you to use a browser. So then we went back and we built the feature, the session recovery. So what it does is, whatever changes that you're doing, so the data that is in the models and also the stores, we leverage the local storage and put that data into the local storage. And if a browser crashes or if you accidentally close it, we're gonna pop up a window saying that if you want to recover your session. So once you click yes, if you want to recover session, once the view is rendered, instead of starting from the scratch, we leverage the data that is in the local storage and put it back into the instances of the models and the stores, so that you can take it off from wherever you left. So this interface is like what you see is what you get. So as you could see, whatever you configured or you used while building a report is exactly what you saw in the report output with the same size. And it's also, even though it's built on Ext JS 4, and we are mobile friendly, which means if not all, most of the features our clients are still able to run it on mobile. So compared to legacy, these are some of the benefits that we're able to get is the improved data limits, like we are able to render 250,000 cells in the report, and we are also able to render 250 columns in the grid, and we can fit about 5,000 nodes in any of the tree panels. And we pull some usage where with legacy, people were using the Excel tools like 40%, and once we put in the new framework, the Excel usability has come down to 20%, which means they're using more web right now because of the better user experience. And the drag and drop feature of Ext JS was really helpful for us, and like all the events that were available, we were able to make use of it. And also, when we built like this 3 years ago, and the Sencha charts did not have the features that we wanted, so we used AM charts, and it was so straightforward to integrate with other frameworks with Ext JS. So even with the theming, you couldn't even tell that it was not Sencha charts. And the Ext JS also, since we are global, we need our applications to be rendered in different languages. So the Ext JS comes with a bundle, the localization framework. So any static text that you have is to put it in the static files, and the framework is going to take care by rendering your app in different language based on what you pass it in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about theming. So with Ext JS in the morning session, so we did have a little bit overview of theming. So we use Sencha command to build the themes. So it's pretty straightforward. Like you don't have to do the CSS coding anymore to generate the themes. So with the Sencha command, you can extend one of the Ext JS themes, and you just use a command Sencha generate to build your Nielsen theme. So for example, if you want to change your font all over your application, so you create a file called component. So these are the global variables, which means you change the font family, and you just regenerate your theme, and the font is changed everywhere in your application. And if you want like a particular change it only for a particular component, like change only a panel header. So again, in the theme structure, you go to the particular component folder and use the CSS variable that is predefined with the Ext JS and give it a color. So it's only gonna affect only that particular panel. And also you can create the customized components, which means if you have multiple panels and you want one panel to be rendered in a different color, and this is how you do it. So you create your custom class and give it a label, and use that custom defined label in your JavaScript for the UI parameter, and it's going to pull that particular CSS for that. So we built 4 applications, and with the custom theme, we have packaged it, and all these applications use the same theme, so that you can extend this theme package to any Ext.js based application across your company, so that all the other teams, they don't have to invest time and money to build themes for each and every application that you build. So the other part that we are able to leverage with Sencha command is to build and deploy. So for our build scripts, we use something called Gradle. Has anyone worked with Gradle, has experience with Gradle? We used to use Maven before, but we came across this. It's a really good deployment automation system. It's based on Groovy, and it supports both Ant and Maven. And you can also run a command like supports any commands that you run on the command line. And it's pretty also easy to manage your external dependencies. So if you want to reference your repositories, you just give the location of the Maven and you define your dependencies like that. And so the last one is, so if you want to run it on a Tomcat, you just need to mention apply plugin as Tomcat, and you give the port number, and it automatically gets the Tomcat, a instance of Tomcat for you. So we combine Sencha command and Gradle to package the front end. So since we have multiple applications, we didn't want each application to have its own version of framework, because when we use since we use 4.x, and we want all the applications to reference the same framework and the same themes, and we don't want individual applications to maintain their own. Which means whenever we are building any one of the applications, it needs to point to this generic package which is sitting outside the application. To do this, you need to tell the application that, hey, don't look for the package within the application. So we create something called as symbolic links, and we support symbolic links, which comes with Gradle. So we're telling to look for the Ext JS workspace and the themes and the packages, which is outside, by referencing the location, and create the symbolic link. And the last snippet of the code is, once you have the reference of these packages which are sitting outside the application, then you do a Sencha app build to take that package and run it. So these are the challenges that we were able to resolve with this, primarily with the Ext JS framework. Now we did the deferred and lazy rendering, and Ext JS also supports like suspending and resuming events. Like when you're dragging and dropping, if you want to give it some time, and which means you can suspend an event so that there's not a whole lot going on, and resume the event once the user is done with the drag and drop. And we also cache the UI components, which means when you want to get a reference of a particular view, like if you're looking for a particular grid, and if your application has like 20 grids, you don't have like if you want to parse through all the grids, it's a very expensive operation. So what we do is we get a reference and we cache it, and if you want to reference it again, it's already cached. So, and with the Sencha command, you have the minified JavaScript, which means the footprint is reduced a lot. And the whole system is unified, which means if I need to upgrade to a newer version of Sencha or the Ext JS framework, I have to do it at one place for both themes and the version. So, and all the other applications referencing can leverage from it. And with Ext JS 4 and also the versions 4 and above supports the MVC, the architecture, so that your code is organized very neatly. And the framework also does a good job with the dependency loading. So if you're referencing any views, it loads those views automatically. And also, since we use multiple applications, we have application events. So Ext JS, you can fire and listen to these application events across different modules or applications. So this is where we want to be in the future. We want to upgrade to the higher versions and to get the much faster load times. And we are also will be also upgrading to the Sencha charts and probably avoid external dependencies. And we are also investing in like a mobile strategy where we want the complete features to be working on mobile. So these are some of the tools that are already built on 5.x within Nielsen. This is for the TV ad snapshots that we do. So we get the ad details, and for the online campaign ratings. So this is one of the version for Geico. So this already uses the Sencha charts, and this is also supported on mobile. Okay, any questions? Does this ring a bell? Yes, sir.
Were you able to use only the Sencha grid to do all your data visualization? There's no other grid, there are no other functions, but you must be presenting a lot of data. All of it is done with Ext JS grid?
Yes, everything is done with the Ext JS grid. So all the customization that we've added with the Ext JS grid.
grids or views or.
Sorry. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're caching the views? Either you're using the component manager and looking them up by ID, or using a query to find them later. And do you ever destroy any of the views, or you just keep adding them up on the DOM?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we try not to use IDs, because that's like we have so many components, so we don't do IDs. So we use a component query, and so if you're in a particular window, and if you want to query a grid, you would know if this grid is inside the window or outside the window. So we use a component query and parse through all the grids in that particular in the view structure. And once we get an instance of it, we cache it. And once we cache it, once the user is done with that particular component or goes to the next screen, we drop the cache. The system is automatically going to take it. We have a custom code to drop the cache.
I see. So you do destroy views once the user navigates out of that,
That is
then you
correct.
reinstantiate them.
That is correct.
So one last question about performance. So do you guys cache any of the reports, so that the next time the user, so you're dragging and dropping multiple dimensions, and you're looking at different range dates.
Yes.
And so you can talk a little bit about that. I know this is more of a UI demo, but I'm just curious about if you're just speeding up the loading of the data.
So yeah, in our business BI layer, there are different levels of caching that we do. Like for example, if you run a report, we create a dot matrix of the combination of the selections that you did, and if other user ran the same thing, and if he has his permissions, we are going to leverage the cache. And also we also cache the whole report, which means the raw data that is used to paint the report. We take that whole data and cache it. So if the user wants to check the report that he ran yesterday and doesn't want to make any changes, we don't even have to query the database, because we take that raw data from the cache and repaint it again. And if there are more questions, I'm going to be outside. You guys can stop by for any more questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.